I did a lot of things I still do a lot of things on the guitar where instead of hammering on in typical fashion where you play a note, like the 5th fret of the G string in this case, and then hammer to the 7th fret or the 7th and 9th fret, like that. I would do a lot of things where I'm playing a note on, say, the G string, but then I'd hammer another string entirely. And numerous times students would come back the next week and say, I think you made a mistake here. You have a hammer on here. It might be a run, right? That was like something like that, where I've got a big interval jump. And that big interval jump would say hammer on. And they would think, well, that doesn't make any sense. Nobody does that. So then I would clarify, yeah, that is actually a hammer on. But I figured maybe I should come up with a term that differentiates that type of hammer on from the normal type of hammer on, where you would like that. And so I came up with hammer on from nowhere because I figured it's not coming from that. The hammer on isn't happening from the same string. It's happening from somewhere else. So anyway, that's the history of that term. But more interesting than that is the fact that it's actually not, there are some really cool things you can do to immediately implement this technique into your playing and sound like you've got a lot more skill with your right hand than you might have if you're not like a super finger picker guy, which I'm not. Sometimes people will ask me how I developed my finger picking skills because they think that's what's happening. But really what's happening is I'm taking advantage of hammer-ons from nowhere with my left hand and coordinating that with my right hand in ways that can sort of create the perception of having a lot more sort of finger picking skills. So I'll give you an example of what I mean. You can take this is a good way to start, just take a simple triad, like in this case, A major. So I'm just playing a 3-note chord, and my B string is the highest pitched string. I got B string, G string, and D string. And on the highest note, that is the B string, I'm going to play either an upstroke or I'm going to pluck with my second finger. I think they generally refer to that as hybrid picking today, but whatever you want to call it, I'm going to play an upstroke or a pluck on that high note. And then on the middle string, which in this case is the G string, I'm going to play a downstroke. So I'm either going to do this or this. And then on the low note, the note that's closest to the ceiling, I'm going to play a hammer-on. And that's going to be basically a hammer-on from nowhere, meaning that we didn't play any note on that string prior to the hammer-on. So here we go. We can go just like that. So that's all it is. Simple pluck, down, hammer. So you can get comfortable with that. And one of the things you can do immediately is, obviously move it around a little bit, but you can also change that sequence so it doesn't sound so triplety. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And you can change it into something that feels more like 4 notes per beat. So I might play 2 sets of these 3s, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2. So I'm only playing the first 2 notes of that shape. I'm not doing the hammer on the third time around. Let me just play it. It'll make more sense. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. So anyway, it makes it, practicing a little bit more interesting when things can sound a little bit not so mundane, right? It sounds a little bit cooler, a little more musical. So that's a cool place to start. And this leads to a lot of other things that you can do. Like one of the exercises that I used to give students, if they wanted to get into this, would just be to play that same shape, like a triad shape, maybe start up here at the 12th fret. So you have the E note, the E chord, E major chord. And then you can just take the second finger of your right hand, or left hand, sorry, off the fretboard and immediately have an E minor chord. So you can go, right? So I just went from E major to E minor, and then after that, you could even, come up with another chord, maybe this sort of suspended sounding B major chord, right? I'm sort of sus4 sound. So we could go, so we could have these 4 chords: E major, E minor, maybe this B sort of sus sound, and then B major. And so I could take either the triplet sequence and do do all 4 of those, or I could take the other sequence, which was, to me, a little more interesting. Or you could shorten the amount of times you do each one. So. And that's the other thing. If you notice right there, I'm playing notes that are really far away from these high notes here. So the nice thing about a hammer-on from nowhere is that you can hammer it to anything that you can reach. If you can reach it, you can hammer it. And imagine trying to pick so that this note all the way down here. I mean, imagine having to go fast, right? So I can get that really quick, and I can walk down the scale and do things like so it's really convenient at sounding like you're way better than you actually are. But that's, if you listen to my albums that I've done, throughout the 90s, early 2000s especially, this stuff is all over. Even on the last album, which was Wheelhouse, there's a section that's uses a lot of these hammer-ons from Nowhere I Go. So again, when you hear it in context and real music, it sounds a lot more impressive. When you see it, it's sort of like, oh, that's easy, because actually it is easy. But it sounds really cool, and it's very musical. On the Extraction album, I have a song called A Delicacy, where I really utilize that technique quite a bit. It doesn't really, electric guitar doesn't probably do it justice, but it's a instrumental piece, that unaccompanied instrumental piece, where I have a lot of these hammer-ons from Nowhere on different strings. I'm playing things like. Anyway, that's my sound advice for today.